Welcome to Decker Tech. I'm Aaron Decker, and today we're talking about Tank Andrin. Frontline Andrin is very fun, very interesting. It enables a lot of combo plays, enables a lot of fast builds, and it's also just very fun for deck manipulation and not having a warrior as your front line, because sometimes it's boring to just have the warrior as the front line. So scouts can do it too. This is a good starting point. All right, let's see. I went base 7 minus poverty. Spent about 1,000 shards on this deck. I figure that's a good starting point for most people. If you need something cheaper, you should have enough here to kind of figure out where to cut some corners. And if you need anything more expensive, yeah, I'll try to tell you where you to spend more money. But you should be able to get this sort of deck very efficiently and very consistently on any difficulty. And let's see, this one I did a starting point with the assumption that you're going for speed manipulation, some basic tanking, and your just goal is Ballad of Evasion on turn 2. When I've been playing it recently, I actually didn't. I didn't. My goal was not Ballad of Evasion. It was just chance. So we'll talk about what you can do and what your goals are. But Andrin, biggest strength. Can cycle through his deck very fast. Starts with 2 deflects. So those are basically 2 boons. So your starting deck size is 13. So we're going to kind of lean into that a little bit more. We're going to build another deflect. And we're doing these very expensive vigilances. So these are like injuries, but they're injuries that cycle, like it's like a boon that costs 1 energy. You know what I mean? So the reason we have these is the vigilance pairs very well with trace, and we're going with an innate trace because we can't quite get a deck that is 100% consistent on turn 1 with our starting deck and resources. Because eventually that's the goal of Andrin, is his turn 1 should be you can do the same thing every time you play him. It requires some finesse, some tactics that we can't employ from turn 1, act 1, but eventually we can get there. And so to get around that in Act 1, what we're doing is an innate trace, which says we can filter what our top of our deck is. But the reason we need the vigilance is even if like majority of our cards say draw a card, but if we drew everything that didn't draw a card and had the trace in our hand, like we wouldn't be able to get the cards we want. So if we start with like Ballad of Evasion. Oh, the card we're missing here is Setup, but we'll talk about that later. So the idea is we clog our deck with these 2 cantrips for sure, these 2 vigilances, and then we start with the trace on ourselves if we don't have what we like or see what we like in our hand, and we try to trim down and dig for what we're looking for. In this case, this one, all it's trying to do is play 2 Chance of Initiative, play an Expert Tracker, and keep Ballad of Evasion for next turn, or dig through the deck fast enough that we can Ballad of Evasion on turn 2. So this basic goal is 2 Chance to speed up our team, put some armor up, and plan on doing Ballad of Evasion at the beginning of next turn. Yeah, and so once it can do that with the trace and the vigilances and the chance, it's all set up for next turn, and then I can use this Expert Tracker on someone else to set up a good turn for them. What was I going with? Yes. So there's 2 sides to Andrin deck. There is the Cantrip side and then the Payoff side. So Cantrip side, we're looking for anything that can draw through itself. So we've already done the deflect. You can craft 2 on certain difficulties. That's perfectly fine. Setup is a really good one. I like the blue version the most. Yellow version has a higher ceiling but a lower floor, meaning you can get better rewards for playing it, but you can also sometimes not get everything you need by playing it. Like it's a higher gamble, higher roll of the dice. You're rolling a d20 instead of 2d6. Anyway, floor and ceiling, hopefully. If you don't know what floor or ceiling means, please comment in the section and I will respond. But so I say blue setup is good. We're doing the vigilances just because they pair well with the trace. Ideally, a perfect Andrin deck does not have trace or vigilance in it, but it's a really good starting point. And yeah, tune-up. Why is that not showing up here? Tune-up. So this is another cantripy side you can do. So the blue one, assuming you don't start with all the songs in your opening hand, will replace itself with a song, so that counts as a cantrip. It is a 1-cost cantrip, but it also generates stanza, and depending on what your payoff cards are, this could be a better cantrip for you than some of the other ones we're doing. Cantrip, again, is cards that are replacing themselves for 0 or small. Cheap or none cost. Cheap or no cost. No or little cost. I can speak straight today. Payoff cards. So most of our payoff cards are songs. Ballad of Evasion is a very common frontline Andrin version to run with. It's a lot of fun. Just inspire to your entire team is great. Evasion to your entire team can do a lot of powerful things. You got to be aware with buffer depending on who you're playing with on your team. Another payoff, of course, is Eternal Lullaby. Now this one you can actually do turn 1. So there's 2 halves to any speed manipulation. One is speeding up your team, which the chants do really well, or slowing down your opponents. And Eternal Lullaby does the slowing down your opponents part. And it does it very well. It's also very expensive. So to do this, you have to make sure that you're nice and slim, you're guaranteeing your adrenaline, and you are being able to cast this on turn 1, or have everything cost 0 and do this on the lower difficulties. Difficulties that start with 5 energy. Because the ones that start with 4 energy, this one costs 4, but it stands at 2, so you can't play it turn 1. So if you're trying to play Lullaby turn 1, you have to have a way to access to 5 energy and to stands on turn 1. It seems kind of a stretch, but it's definitely something Andrin can do. If you're doing that sort of thing, you can't be running Vigilances. You have to be guaranteeing the adrenaline, and you have to be doing the 0 chance instead of the 1 cost chance. Because the other version of chant is pretty good here, the 1 cost, because it has +1 more speed. And we'll talk about speed manipulation here in a second as well. Other payoff, Sweet Melody can be fairly useful. There's also a AoE. There's an all-hero dispel that's not showing here. That's one of the other big payoffs is the AoE dispel, or the AoE evasion, or the AoE heal. You can make a kind of a bard out of Andrin, because you can just have a consistent deck and you're guaranteeing that stands at turn 1. I feel like I missed something there. Cantrips, payoffs. One of the payoffs. I don't remember what the payoff is I'm missing. Oh, you can also be running him as a set of vulnerability for your team. Find Weakness is one of the best vulnerabilities he has access to. Other than that, Uproot can be a lot of fun. The AoE one is my favorite, but the blue one is repeatable, but it's only a single monster. Most of the time I find that the AoE vulnerable is a good way to go as well. But, yeah, what am I missing? Speed manipulation. So Andrin basically goes faster than every monster other than the Elder Dryad and the Hydra. Just baseline by himself. At the max difficulty, I think Seahorses outspeed him as well, but a way around that is, so he starts with, on the start of his turn, gain fast. So that's not the beginning of combat, the beginning of his turn. So once he's taken a turn, he will stay ahead of the enemies unless he gets shackled or heavily slowed. So what you'll want is something that at start of turn, a start of combat speed. So that's going to be the Forest Crown. That'll give you the fast at start of combat. Otherwise, you just want ways to avoid the shackles and the slows on him, or have someone cleansing them off of him. And then Andrin is basically guaranteed to always go first. And with him always going first, you have the chance to cast these Chants of Initiative on your team. Now, you could run 3 if you divination into one. Otherwise, you can only craft 2 of them. And depending on your lineup, sometimes you want certain people to match or exceed each other in the lineup. And that's why I'm saying Andrin's very good at enabling combos or very strict turn orders that you need. Yes, you can play it just, hey, I like to speed up people, and that's great, because that's very beneficial and that'll help you 90% of the time. But sometimes you need very specific manipulation, and you can do that by going between the blue and the yellow chants, because they have that 1 fast difference. And then maybe one of the people you speed up can also speed up the third person, or you can just find a third chant of initiative. The problem with that third chance of initiative is you have a bigger chance to brick. That's what I missed. I'll talk about bricking and cycling decks and stuff like that. Yeah, what am I missing? That's most of the things Andrin does. Equipment-wise, he really doesn't need much equipment-wise. Forest Crown is like the only thing I think is basically... that's the only ideal thing for him. Everything else is very just gravy. because Sharpie is nice for the Dispel, but you're losing the benefit of he's not being affected by this Wind Blessing very much because he's already doing the every turn gain 1 speed or 1 fast, and since they don't stack, you're just getting the Dispel 1. He can be pretty good for Oculi just because it's clearing buffer stacks and he goes first. But Asmodee, he's pretty good with Asmodee because he does have Mark's energy. So there's the idea that his very end game level 5 talent gives +3 Mark. So Asmodee's just doing more Mark. But I personally, this version, we're not really using him as a Mark machine. Yes, we have lots of Mark going on here. But that's not as needed. So I need to talk about bricking and I need to talk about Mark. Let's talk about Mark first since we were just talking about that. The slices are pretty good at generating it, and this deck kind of vanishes down to just slicing every turn. So you're just applying Mark to the front target and reapplying Hunter's Mark to wherever you need it. Mark does not benefit from Powerful or Fury, so depending on what DPS you're playing with, it's not as efficient. It's still really good, especially in Act 1 or 2. But I find in Act 3 or 4, I've moved away from Mark. But if you want to lean into Mark, there's nothing wrong with doing that. If so, you're going to pick Wild Hunt and Mark for Death. But in general, talent-wise, I would go with Maneuver. This is basically a better than Deflect. As long as you play at least 1 energy behind it, it is a deflect. If you play any more than 1 energy, it's better than. It'll draw you more cards and give you more evasion. So this is just a good frontline Andrin card, and it's also another cantrip, which helps us not brick, which we'll talk about later. Of these two, Range Mastery is only affects cards that start in your hand, and since we're playing a lot of cantrips and cards that are shuffling through our deck really fast, and we're drawing a lot, and you know this won't help us very often. Even if we have a range card in our deck, it's not going to reduce it. So momentum is the way we're going here. It also refunds an energy instead of reducing it in the starting hand. So if we draw into the slice later and then cast it, we're still getting the energy refund. We really don't need this momentum, and that's really not one of the goals of the deck, but it does play into some of the cards sometimes. If we get something that says when you play a melee attack, draw a card, then that item plus this momentum makes that slice a cantrip, but that's really the only use you'll see from the momentum. Of these two, serrated weapons we're not really attacking much, so Riposte, I usually cut it from the deck, but if you're going into the heavy Mark build, this is a good way to go. Also, it can be a lot of fun to just play Riposte and then 3 deflects and just have a bajillion block, but it's not really something we're needing or keeping in the deck. And then the final one, Mark for Death, is the only one since we're not doing ranged attacks and we're not using Andrin as a damage dealer. And this will only help us if we have any Mark generation still in the deck, which sometimes we won't. So it's not a big deal. It's okay if your level 3 and your 4 and 5 don't do anything for Andrin, because Andrin's power is early game and deck consistency, and just his starting deck plus maneuver will get you very, very far with him. So bricking. So when you're trying to cycle through a deck and draw very specific cards, or you're trying to execute a combo, if you draw a card that doesn't redraw itself or isn't the card you're looking for, then we call that a brick. Because if you're looking for exactly 5 cards in your deck, and you have the 5 cards you're looking for, everything draws a card except for 1 extra card that doesn't draw itself and isn't the card you're looking for, then you're looking to draw all but that card, right? How do I explain this? I'm not explaining it very well. So looking at these starting 15 cards, Ballad of Evasion is a brick on turn 1. We do not want to see it on our hand. The only way it's not a brick on our hand is if we had Setup in the deck and we had drawn Setup before Ballad of Evasion. But what can happen is even if we had Setup in the deck, if we draw the Ballad of Evasion but not the Setup, then we have no way of getting rid of the Ballad, so we bricked. It's a card in our hand that we can't do anything with. So when you're playing one of your payoff cards is stanza 2, plan on only needing 4 other cards, because you want to plan on the setup where the scenario where you draw the Ballad of Evasion and you can't do anything with it, and you only draw 4 of the cards that you want. I hope that's making sense. I'm trying my best here. So Ballad Evasion of the brick. Trace is technically a brick, but we're starting with it in our hand. So we can really only guarantee 3 cards on turn 1 in this version of Andrin. Future versions, we're going to aim for 4 cards. And if you're not doing a stanza 2 payoff, then you can aim for 5 cards. But right now, the 3 cards we're looking for are Chant of Initiative, and a Slice. But as you can see, we have 2 other Slices and a Ballad of Evasion and a Hunter's Mark. Those are all bricks for us. Oh, Expert Tracker. It's like this deck as it is not very consistent, but it's a good starting point. It'll get you there most of the time. So that's what you're looking to trace away. Is if you go to trace yourself and you see any Slices or this Hunter's Mark or this Ballad of Evasion, those are all things you're discarding. So even though you might be looking for 1 slice on your turn, you probably want to get rid of any slices you see with the trace, because the second slice or the third slice are going to be the card you're not looking for. They're going to be your bricks for that round, that turn. What are the final 5 cards you're looking for when you're cycling through your deck? Yes. Anything that, setup would be a card that I'd highly run in this deck. I just didn't want to afford for the budget. I'd just run a blue setup instead of one of the slices. But then, of course, I don't have final 5 cards for if you're going for, future turns kind of stuff, which it's not a big deal. You can play with less than 5 cards a turn. That's fine. Yeah. If you have any questions, write them in the comments. I think I covered everything I wanted to. Some of the best songs are really just rares. There is an energizing one that's like stanza 3 or something. That's a mythic that I don't recommend. Song. Battle of Evasion is a very good and consistent one. Eternal Lullaby is a lot of fun. It's mainly the slow you like off of it. For this frontline Andrin, not for other versions. And like I said, the AoE Dispel and the AoE Heals are 2 good ones to go as well. And cards we're not seeing in the deck: Tune Up and Setup. The ups. I guess I wonder what happens if we just type up. Nope. Pretty close. Yeah. Up. The only thing, because Uproot is another one that's not on the list. So other than Rupture, just type in up and you'll see all the cards that aren't in the deck that you should probably consider if you're looking for more. And like I said, Andrin, it's all about what are you trying to guarantee for your team. For me, last time I played him, I was just trying to guarantee 2 blue Chants of Initiative and an Expert Tracker. So I was getting that very consistently, and that was my goal, and that's all I needed. You really don't need Andrin to do much to stay alive as a front line. One thing I didn't discuss is if you are going long fights and you're having some consistency issues of staying alive, you can add in a blur or any other sort of evasion here. And the trick about that is if you're running a blur, since it stealths you and does evasion, you have to cast a card after it. So make sure you don't play blur as your final card. Play blur and then play another card, and then you're just getting the evasion side of the blur. I say blur because acrobatic is expensive, and disengage is really good. I like disengage. Disengage is a good one. I'd go to disengage before blur, but sometimes you just don't have the energy for disengage. And yeah, that's all I got. We'll catch you later. Peace.